Dear Warframe, step it up. I've put hundreds of hours into this game, but I just don't have motivation to play anymore. It's really saddening to say that too, because I love this game, but now my feelings toward it are jaded at best. Now that I've had the opportunity to play other RPGs, shooters, and MMOs, I realize now what this game is lacking in, but seems to refuse to acknowledge. As a disclaimer, I haven't played anything through the newest content yet, that being Fighting a Kuva Lich, Rising Tides content, and Empyrean, so maybe some of my criticisms have been addressed already. But that doesn't change the notion of this whole rant. I'm making this video to basically restate what everybody else has said a million times already, but provide a little bit of my own insights to it, which is that Warframe doesn't cater to endgame players, as lackluster as that feature is. See, the problem that I have with Warframe is its egregious lack of meaningful endgame content. The game has it, sure, just look at Eidolons, Orb Mothers, and, well, the other Eidolon. The groundwork is set for what the endgame content should look and play like, except the difficulty is kinda wonky, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Eidolons and Orb Mothers are gargantuan bosses that at face value require you to execute specific unique mechanics in order to beat the boss and get the most or best rewards. For the Eidolons, you have to be properly geared in the form of your operator. The fight itself is time limited across all instances, and mechanics need to be completed in order to face the next boss in the form of protecting the lures and keeping them close to the boss. Skilled players are able to do this multiple times within the time limit, but all three bosses are able to be beaten in an hour by inexperienced players. The rewards for them are both cosmetic and gear, meaning it gives every type of player something to fight for, on top of being able to drive player economy. There's always going to be someone looking for an easy way to get the new shiny gear. With Orb Mothers, in a weird way, raids were kind of brought back. A multi-mission structure involving getting certain pieces of equipment to fight them, then going on said mission to fight. The fights for Orb Mothers is a lot more parkour based versus the more grounded style of gameplay with the Eidolon fights. This to me seems like a strong display of variety in gameplay with these two bosses, but the problem comes up with the mind-numbingly frustrating aspect of actually fighting the boss, and completely piss-poor rewards for each of them offers. Starting with Eidolons, they have a lot of attacks that are very hard to see, or are just plain unfair. Each of the three Eidolons has a starbeam attack, where they shoot a projectile into the sky, and it disperses to fall back out to the ground and damage you. The thing is, it's impossible to tell the exact range of the explosions of the attacks, and it's borderline impossible to know when they'll land. The Gauntlet has an area of effect that's really annoying, and almost guaranteed to kill you if you're caught out. After it's taken a lot of damage, it'll produce a shield aura around it that can't be shot down and damages all players outside of it. It makes for an interesting wipe mechanic, but when the fight bugs out and the boss decides to teleport across the map, it becomes an incredibly frustrating ordeal to get back to your target. Thankfully, this is a rare bug and doesn't happen often, so this is really more of a nitpick. Lastly, the Hydralisk has this bullshit lightning that insta-kills operators, and I swear to God, as soon as I exit stealth, I get one shot by this stupid fucking mechanic. Oh yeah, did I also mention screen shake and disorienting bright colors? Because you get a lot of that in this fight. Then you have the gear rewards that comes from these fuckers, Arcanes. I personally think they're overhyped. It's a piece of gear that has RNG activation, and the bonuses that most of them grant are lackluster at best. Don't get me wrong, some of them are great in very specific circumstances, like getting 2 arcane nullifiers grants you immunity from magnetic damage, allowing you to basically just ignore certain parts of the Eidolon fights. They're nice additions to gameplay, but they don't feel like true endgame rewards. I don't think the drop tables for Eidolons will change anytime soon, but hopefully the next super boss, or hopefully raid boss, will drop gear that feels truly endgame, something that really heightens or augments the power you already have. Imagine an arcane for semi-auto pistols that overpenetrate targets on death and increase damage after going through an enemy, or an augment for buckshot shotguns that creates a pellet explosion around enemies that have been headshot killed. Think the conference call from Borderlands 2. I think with a PvE game like Warframe, I think there's possibility for this type of gear. The Orb Mothers, though, are a bit different case for the super bosses. While the fights themselves are fair and interesting, except for a few shoddy hitboxes and the annoying number of ads, the rewards suck. Almost all the rewards that come with beating both Profit Taker and Exploiter Orbs can be found elsewhere, and the exclusive rewards are something that's one and done, like the Exploiter Orb dropping pieces for Hildren. It seems like so much wasted potential. And on top of that, everything in the game seems to be such a huge grind for very little payoff. Take Prime Warframes and weapons, for example. You have to first farm specific missions to have a chance at getting the relic you want, but you'll probably want multiple just to make sure you have enough to get what you want. If the part you want is a rare drop from the relic, you radiant it. Then you try to find a group to farm the same radiant relic with you. You get the part, but then the whole process needs to be repeated between about 2 to 5 more times. But that's only counting if you get the drop from the relic the first try each time. But if you've played Warframe long enough, you'll know that doesn't happen often. So this process can be repeated dozens of times before you get the completed weapon or frame that you're after. Then, once you get all the parts, there's a crafting time for everything. Weapons take 12 hours to complete, and Warframes take 12 hours to build each individual part. Then it takes 3 days to build the Warframe itself. 3.5 days of crafting time for a new frame. If you're making a prime frame, it feels almost pointless. Compared to their normal counterparts, they'll usually have an extra polarity in their mod space, and about 50 extra shields, health, armor, or energy. I don't feel rewarded for waiting such a long time for a frame that isn't more powerful than the one that I already have. The only exclusive passive prime frames have, and it's shared by all of them, is getting like 50 energy from touching those Organ Death Orbs. Nothing else. Prime weapons are about the same. They provide meaningful stat buffs compared to their normal versions, but they don't have much that makes them feel unique. I don't feel rewarded for my grind, because soon enough there will be a new normal weapon that has better stats. All Prime should have a passive applied to them that makes them unique to use. They don't have to be overpowered either. It could just be something fun, but we need something to justify all the time spent grinding for this gear. Look at the Piranha Prime. Getting 3 kills in a row spawns a ghost gun next to it, effectively doubling damage if you could get kills in time. The Ballistica Prime makes enemies killed by a fully charged shot into ghosts that fight for you for a short time. It's kind of an irrelevant passive, but it makes something that's unique for the weapon. A looter shooter that does meaningful grind correct in my opinion is Destiny 2. I spent a copious amount of time grinding for a specific submachine gun called the Recluse. In order to get the gun, you need to play and win ranked PvP to get your rank up to a certain level. I did that, and only that, for hours in order to get the weapon, and I wasn't disappointed when I got it either. Recluse has a unique passive that effectively doubles damage after a kill with any weapon in my arsenal, making it a godsend in horde situations. Then, I spent time doing quests for specific exotic weapons. I was feeling rewarded whenever I completed challenges for specific weapons because they were unique, with some type of unique passive, no matter how low or high the damage was. To me, Warframe doesn't have that feeling, because it just feels like I'm chasing a stat upgrade, rather than something that feels different. And I think Warframe would be doing a lot better if it released more meaningful content at a more consistent rate. We all know about major content droughts in the game, but I really think that some of it is just plain unacceptable, since there was nothing to do in between at first. And to the game's credit, there's a lot more to do in game between updates with night waves, but how often can players do the same challenges with no twist or spice to them before they get burnt out? How often can players play the same type of missions over and over before they get bored? Certain missions should have hard mode versions of them with meaningful rewards to make veterans feel like their work for farming ribbons and other gear is useful. Arbitrations did this in a way, but having only one life without having bleed out timers is honestly the worst, considering the broken enemy scaling. Not to mention, most of the rewards are lackluster at best, being a resource you could get literally anywhere else, granted in much smaller quantities. Again, comparing this game to Destiny 2, it has certain missions called strikes, which have different difficulties to them, and increasing difficulty not only requires you to have more powerful gear, you're required to have special pieces of equipment to deal with special and powerful enemies that spawn at harder difficulties. It's a truly grueling experience, but the completion of them is either required for certain missions tied to weapons, or will reward strong gear upon completion. And I honestly believe that Destiny should have set the precedent for Warframe a long time ago, but Warframe didn't learn. They removed raids in place of world superbosses, and since alluding to bringing back raids over 2 years ago, they haven't released any. And the Warframe community seems to hate it when Destiny does what Warframe is lacking. But, come on. I said this earlier, Destiny should have set the precedent for Warframe, but it just kept doing its own thing. And that's fine, But Warframe players have been begging for new content, and sometimes the devs gives us parcels of it with rewards recycled from other resources. But DE continues to push out new skins, weapon skins, Warframe skins, color palettes, landing craft skins, etc. And it's fine to release cosmetics to players. Destiny does this too, but they also have a plethora of unique content to offer on top of PvP. You can tell that Warframe is severely lacking in content if you just take a look at the subreddit. There's a separate sub dedicated to Fashion Frame. However, the main sub is littered with Fashion Frame, and discussion about the game is sparse. It's for reasons like this that content creators were leaving. They had no content to create, and they needed to find new games to play. It's partially due to relying on one game solely for their content, but that's a story for another day. It's really saddening to see this happening. I love this game. The game seems unlimited in its potential. There's room to add cool weapons and bosses that could add a plethora of unique rewards, like the arcanes I talked about earlier. Hopefully, the game will have a major turnaround when the real Railjack finally drops. And maybe that'll see a resurgence of players, because I really hate to see this game fail.